Hello, Thrivers. Today I'm talking about shame. And honestly, there are so many things we can say about shame. But for the sake of this video, I want to focus on when shame is part of the trauma bond that maybe you had in childhood with a parent. And it could be a parent that had a personality disorder like NPD or BPD, or it could be a parent that had addictions, or even just an emotionally unavailable parent. If there was shame in that parent and they interacted with their child with shame, it can cause a trauma bond where shame is the template of every relationship that you wind up having in the future. And this can include the relationship you have with yourself. It can be so interlaced with shame that it almost feels impossible to have a relationship without it. So I'm hoping that with this video, you'll understand why it's hard sometimes to let go of certain relationships that we know aren't healthy. Okay, so it could be a parent relationship, it could be a significant other. Why is it that you strive harder to get someone that is hurting you so much to care? I'm hoping this video clears that up. And I'd like to give you some tips on what you can do to start changing that template. Because any relationship that has shame as its foundation is not going to be healthy, even the relationship you have with yourself. Okay, so that being said, let's dive in. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a life and relationship coach. I specialize in complex PTSD, narcissistic abuse, and childhood trauma recovery. I'm also the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is a monthly membership where we meet live on Zoom and we work through the side effects of childhood trauma and complex PTSD together. So currently enrollment is closed, but February 1st to the 5th, I will be opening the doors for 5 days for anyone that would like to join us. You'll get 7 days free to check it out and see if it's something that's a good fit for you. And if so, the cost is $79 a month. And that includes 9 to 12 live meetings. Okay, that being said, let's dive into shame and the trauma bond. Okay, so just keeping it simple and light, okay? We are born with the need to bond. It's part of our makeup. It's part of our design that we are designed to bond with our parents. Okay. And that bond and that need to bond causes us to want to be anything to make our parent happy. Now, in healthy enough parenting, that's a good thing, right? But if you have a toxic parent or a parent that has their own trauma wounds that they haven't healed, then it can cause a lot of problems. For example, if shame is very much in the parent, and we know that NPD, anyone with NPD, BPD, anyone that has addictions, there is a core wound of shame that is underneath that parent, whether they're conscious of it or not. And a parent like that winds up oftentimes projecting that shame onto the child or treating the child in the same way they were treated. So it becomes generational, right? And if that child is now absorbing that shame, right? Because every interaction has that shame there. For example, if the parent doesn't feel good enough, it might say something to the child that makes the child not feel good enough. And that's that shared shame going back and forth. If you're wondering if you had that shame in the bond that you had with your parents, you can ask yourself, did I feel good enough to my parents? Did I feel unconditionally loved and supported? Did I feel worthy? Were those the beliefs that were put in me when I was a young child? And if they weren't, then there's that shame wound. Okay. And if you had that shame wound, then you interacted with your parent and that shame wound was there. So what happens in childhood, because we're always being pushed, our brain pushes us to bond, right, with our parents, we have that shame wound. And what our brain decides to do, because it's so, shame is one of those emotions that does not feel good in the body. Okay, emotions, any emotion is just energy in motion. Some feel awesome, when we have butterflies in our stomach because we're excited, that's an emotion that feels good. When we feel loved and happy, it's like a warmth that fills our whole body. It feels good. When we have shame, it is a horribly dense, heavy, painful emotion in the body. So what happens is in childhood, if that child is interacting with a parent that's causing them to feel shame, it gets tied into survival. In other words, they feel this shame. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. I'm not lovable. I'm unworthy. And it pushes them, the child, to try harder to please the parent, doing anything and everything they can to make that parent happy. I've had people say that they knew in childhood that they had to have a certain tone of voice. They had to show only certain emotions were allowed from them. They had to be and think a certain way. And the child does this because what they're trying to do is gain that parent's love. Okay, so that becomes almost like a constant interaction between the child and the parent. So how does this affect you when you grow up? Well, at some point, thankfully today, these past 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot more information readily available. So a young adult or an older adult finally winds up stumbling on information that wakes them up to the unhealthy dynamic with their parent, right? They realize maybe their parent is toxic, maybe their parent has a personality disorder. Either way, it's so shame-based. Either way, they start realizing and seeing the shame that's in them, and it's almost like the parent wants things to stay that way, right? Whenever somebody is healing with a parent like that, the parent doesn't encourage it, doesn't applaud it. It's almost like the parent gets more abusive in an effort to keep you in that mold of having that shame-based template. So the adult child now starts learning and noticing the toxicity. And on a conscious, logical level, they don't want to continue those dynamics. They don't want to continue constantly being made to feel like they are not enough, unworthy. But when they start to change, when they start to kind of break out of that shame-based template that they've been in so long with their parent, you would think that because it's a good thing that your body is on board with you, and it's not. So you start to try to break out of that shame-based mold, and you feel so uncomfortable. Your trauma responses get kicked on, and you can't seem to let go, sometimes of that parent. And the reason is because in childhood, that mold, that shame-based mold that you were put in, is intertwined in your nervous system with your survival. So it wakes up these thoughts like, if I change, my parent is not going to love me anymore. If I change, I'm letting go of my family, my toxic family. Now, logically, you might think, yeah, that's great. But subconsciously, your subconscious makes you feel like your survival is on the line. So I wanted to say that because a lot of people try to kind of break free of toxic relationships, and they keep kind of getting sucked back in because of these fears that come up in their body. And some of it doesn't even make sense, right? Because your survival isn't on the line anymore. But to your subconscious, it feels like it is, because whenever we have what's known as an emotional flashback, which is when you're about to do something and your body reacts in a way based on something that happened in the past. So, for example, if in the past you tried to feel good about yourself, you were a little kid and you were playing with some toys and you were just happy, and you try to to be happy. And if it was met with shame, like how dare you feel that emotion, right? That created that shame, dented your nervous system so that as an adult, consciously, you're not thinking about that time when you were a little kid, but you go to do something now that will allow you to be happy. And that same intense emotion that happened when you were a child comes up in your body. And it feels so uncomfortable that you stop and you avoid anything that brings up that shame. And this is where it's like getting stuck between a rock and a hard place. I hate that expression, but it fits, so I'm going to use it. It's where no matter what you do, it just feels like it's not going to work. So for example, you want to heal. You want to stop being shoved into this role of being the one in the family that's not worthy, that's not good enough, that has something wrong with them, that is bad. You want to break out of that, but every time you do, your survival kicks on, that something bad is going to happen. Your inner child, so to speak, starts freaking out, trying to keep you from doing anything that's going to change the dynamic between you and that family member. So you try to heal and it feels awful. You don't do anything, you keep things the same, and that feels awful as well. And then you can be stuck looping in between trying to heal and getting pulled back over and over for years and decades. Okay, but I'm hoping that by understanding what's happening, the fact that it's your survival, that shame is intertwined with survival in your nervous system. And I stress this because when you feel this going on in your body, you can think you're going crazy because logically you want to do something, but it's almost like something has taken over your body, and that's your nervous system. And because your nervous system is intertwined with your unconscious or your subconscious mind, it has more power than your conscious mind. Okay, but you are not your nervous system. All of these decisions, all of these behaviors that are pulling you back, they're not you. They are your nervous system, and they are the alarm systems in your brain, in your nervous system, that have been dented from the past. And I know this can, you can talk about this for a long time before it really, really sinks in, but I just want you to know that that's what's happening. It's the dents and the imprints in your nervous system that are keeping you in relationships with a shame template because it has a strategy. If you feel that shame, that gives you something to do. Okay, if that shame is there, then you can try harder, you can change, you can work on yourself, you can do this, you can do that. And your brain, instead of looking at the shame, gets busy doing things. And it's like a distraction that keeps you thinking that there's hope with that family member. The negative part of that is the fact that it doesn't let you live life without shame. It's almost like shame is embedded in the imprint of every relationship that you wind up having, because it becomes the means by which you are able to stay close to the parent. It doesn't make logical sense, but that is what's going on in your nervous system. Because that's a template for relationships, it's impossible to feel self-love for yourself. It's impossible for you to live your life without feeling shame, whether you're close to the toxic people or not. You can move out, but that shame template is still there, and it will show up in all of your relationships. So I could go on and on on that topic, but I just want to shift now to the fact that you can break out of it. Okay, it does take time, and it does take doing things differently. Our subconscious mind doesn't like that. Our subconscious mind is a habit mind, and it loves for you to stay stuck doing the same things in relationships that you've been doing for a long time. Because even if what you've been doing isn't making you happy, to your nervous system and your subconscious mind, it's still working because you're alive. And it's more interested in your survival than it is your happiness. Okay. So the reason I say that is because whenever it's time to start changing and doing the inner work, I want you to expect discomfort. I want you to expect resistance, because that's just how it is. That's how we have to change. In fact, the resistance and the discomfort is evidence that you are growing and changing. Okay. So what's involved with breaking out of that shame template? Well, I'm trying to make this not too long of a video, but basically, when you are still feeling those beliefs, I'm not enough, I'm unworthy, there's something fundamentally wrong with me, I'm screwed up, I'm crazy, I'm unlovable. When you're still living in those beliefs, you wind up getting stuck in what some call your child mind. You could either call it your child mind or your emotional brain. But basically, whenever the past is being activated in the present, right? Whenever the past wounds are coming up, we are experiencing emotional flashbacks that often cause you to live in a half-brained state, which means we have our left hemisphere, we have our right hemisphere. Left hemisphere being our logical mind, so we can call that the adult mind. Right hemisphere being our emotional brain, which we can call child mind. What keeps them together is your corpus callosum. And when you've been through trauma, that corpus callosum acts as a wall instead of a bridge between both parts of your brain. So when you have both parts of your brain activated, then you might feel, I'm not worthy. This is my emotional brain. Okay, my right side's my emotional brain. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. That feeling from the past comes up. But if you have access to your left side of your brain, your adult mind, the adult mind can say, I see that feeling. I understand why it's there. You were made to feel that way, but I know that you have value. I see your worth and I love you. And now you have just communicated in a way that helps your brain to stay grounded in the present and to continue to move forward. But if you're in a half-brain state, what they've learned is that when somebody's having an emotional flashback, their left brain, their logical brain, adult mind, checks out. It short circuits. So if you were to look at it in a brain scan, it would be completely black. The right side lit up like fireworks. Okay, so now you have all this emotion. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I can't. I'm a failure. And no logic to say, honey, that's not true. So your child mind is freaking out. And what does it do? It goes to the parent or the toxic person to try to get help in not feeling this way. And this is why if you're in a relationship with somebody that's hurting you emotionally, the thought of leaving is so scary, because all you have is this child mind. And in a sense, in the relationship, it's almost like child and adult, right? You're looking to that person to help you with your emotional needs. Okay, you're looking to them to help you to regulate, which is what children do. Children need the adult to help them. So because in childhood, it was so shame-based and you were stuck in those beliefs and those emotional states, you never learned how to be there for yourself. And that's how you're showing up still in the relationships. And that's why it's so scary to let go of toxic relationships, because in your mind, in the half-brain state that you might be in, without an adult, that's like your survival is on the line. And that's why it's so hard. So I'm hoping that understanding that can kind of take away some of the shame in yourself, because I know that there are times when I came to realize this, and before I really understood it, I would be like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't understand why I'm still stuck. Why don't I let go? Why don't I change this? And I'm hoping that helps a little bit. So in reference to how to break out of this template in your relationships, because if this is your template, you'll wind up showing up like this in every relationship, in your friendships, they'll show up in your relationships at work, and they will show up in your relationships with significant others, where it's almost like you show up and you start feeling like that child again that needs that other person to know that, to love them so that they feel enough. And it doesn't create healthy relationships, and it doesn't allow you to heal and move forward. So what's involved in healing is about learning how to stay in a whole brain state. And that comes with learning how to balance the nervous system. It comes with changing your mindset and learning how to be that parent to that inner wound that you never had. And that takes practice, because we tend to internalize the parenting that we underwent. We tend to treat our emotions the same way our parent did. We ignore them, we shame them, we get mad at them, right? And that just keeps the cycle going. So it involves changing how you show up for yourself. It involves learning how to view your parent and your family instead of from child to adult, with that mentality like, maybe if I do things right, my parent will change. Maybe one day they'll be able to give me what they need. Maybe they're going to see my value one day. If you're thinking those things, you're still in that child, you're interacting with your parent from child to adult. When the reality is that now you are an adult. And so healing involves seeing your parent from adult to adult. Okay. And it's also about you being the adult to the child pieces that are still fragmented and broken inside of you. When you do that, you change that template. You completely change it. And I will say this, one of three things will happen in your relationships. Okay. If you have toxic relationships and you do the inner work, which, by the way, that's what we do in the Thriver School of Transformation. We do the inner work together live. If you do that, one, you might notice that your relationships change. Somebody that once it was like a weird dynamic between you two, your changing changes the relationship, and you find that they show up differently to you and things get better. And I've seen that happen. Okay, I've experienced that happen. I'm going to go over that in the school. The other thing that can happen is your relationships dissipate. Okay, if you're getting healthy and they don't want to change, you'll find that they just leave. Okay, they don't want, they're not happy that things changed. And in their mind, it's either it stays the same, or, I don't want anything to do with you. Or three, the other alternative is they stay the same, right? Because we can't make anybody change. We can only work on ourselves. They stay the same, but it no longer touches you. And that doesn't mean that you allow them to treat you in a toxic way. It doesn't mean that you accept toxic behavior. It just means that you now have boundaries in place. You now interact with them in a healthy way. And when they do whatever they do, it doesn't touch you, and you do whatever you need to do to keep yourself healthy and safe. Those are the three options that happen, but it is way better than staying in relationships with that shame-based template where you never really feel enough. And no matter how hard you work to get other people to see it, right? If you're in that child mentality and you're trying to get other people to see your value, it never feels good, and you never feel like you're healing. So there is a better alternative. I hope that makes sense. And if you're ready to do the inner work, make sure you watch the first week of February, because I do close enrollment when it starts getting too big. I close enrollment in the School of Transformation periodically. So if you're ready to start shifting and get out of that child mind so you can interact with yourself from adult to adult and with others from adult to adult, then make sure you check out when the school opens again in February.